Okay, thank you very much indeed. Welcome, everybody. My name is Councillor Darren Sanders. I'm the Liberal Democrat member for Baffins, North Milton and South Cottonor. I'm also the Cabinet member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness. I've just got a few things, sort of housekeeping things before we get moving. The Guildhall Trust, where we are at the moment, has put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in a COVID-secure manner, and seating has been made available for the public. A small piece of problem: if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the staircases. Don't use the lifts, they tell us. Please assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Also, this is being web streamed. So if you're watching it on web stream, good morning. But if, as it's live streamed, everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. So members of the press or public, we don't have members of the press, we've got people from the public here, are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they don't want to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. Okay, so I'll start, if I may, with some introductions. I'm me, so I've done mine. George, can you start, please?
Councillor George Magic of the Paulsgrove Ward.
Thank you. Cal?
Cal Corkery, one of the councillors for Charles Dickens Ward and the Labour spokesperson for housing.
Thanks, Cal. Daniel?
Daniel Weems, councillor for Hillsley Ward.
Thank you very much. You'll be delighted to know the camera is still on me, which is probably a depressing sight at this time of the morning. Felicity? Yeah, thank you.
Hello, sorry about that. Felicity Goodyear, I'm a Residents Consortium member and a tenant at Perth House, Australia Close.
You couldn't remember where you lived there. I thought that was highly impressive. I said, Young Sue.
Sue Gordon, resident of the courts in Lamport.
Thank you, Sue. Mark.
Good morning, Mark Fitch, Head of Local Authority Housing for Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you. Maria.
Maria Cole, Residents Consortium representative and tenant of Ladywood House.
Thank you, Maria. Now, this is the bit where I may not know everybody's first name, so I'm going to ignore the first names for this row. Hello.
Hiya there, my name's Rebecca Adams and I'm a project manager for the waste team.
That's very kind of you. Hello.
Hello, I'm David Emmett and I'm Head of Waste Services.
Thank you, David, for taking the time to come.
Good morning, I'm Jo Bennett. I'm the Assistant Director for Housing Need and Supply.
Morning, Meredith Hughes, Assistant Director for Buildings.
I'm Stephen Wetherill, Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services, Marketing and Communications Officer.
Thank you. Young Wayne?
Wayne Layton, Finance Manager.
Thank you very much. And finally, Democratic Services.
Alison Harper, Local Democracy Officer.
Okay, thank you. Alison keeps us all sane and legal, basically. So we've got a couple of new people here, so I'll explain how I tend to do these meetings and what these meetings are for. In most councils in the country, essentially these sort of meetings don't happen. They're run just by a cabinet rather than by this sort of approach. When Portsmouth went over to the cabinet system in 2000, it kept aspects of the old committee system. So these meetings don't occur in other parts of the country. Which is, I think, a bad thing, but that's how we work here. So how I tend to run these meetings is that I'll ask the officers to introduce the individual item, and then I will ask the people from the Residents Consortium to give their contributions, and then I will ask the opposition spokespeople to make their contributions, and then I will sum up. Okay? Sometimes things will change, sometimes they won't. We've all had the political people all had discussions in advance with officers about this, so some of the points they raised there will be raised here. But the idea is to try and encourage discussion, but ultimately I'm the one who takes the decisions, which sounds incredibly arrogant, but is also true. But I am interested in people's input. That's all right. I don't have to take any notice at all, but I often do. So, thank you. With that sort of tour d'horizon of of how this works, do we have any apologies for absence? Alison? Thank you, none. Okay, now, does anybody have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, well, this is going quite well so far. Right. Item 3. Now, one of the other aspects is that although this is called a decision-making meeting, there are times whereby there are certain things which are important, which may not necessarily need a decision in a public forum, but are important for our tenants and for our leaseholders, and can be brought here. So the 3 items today I have brought here because I think they're important. I think people need to know what's going on. Okay, so the first of these is the Environment Bill and Landlord Preparation, whatever that means. David or Ms Adams, do you want to try and start on this?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll be introducing this report today. This, as you said, this is an item for information only. The purpose of this report is to update the Cabinet member on the upcoming waste changes as a result of the Environment Act 2021, the administration's ambitions to increase recycling rates to support the city in meeting its net zero carbon commitments by 2030, and how PCC as a social housing landlord is preparing for these changes. So just to give you some brief background on the Environment Act, it is about to bring in a raft of environmental measures, but specifically to waste, it will introduce compulsory separation of more recycling streams and increase the recyclable materials that need to be collected at the curbside. In July 2021, the Cabinet noted the Environment Act and agreed the principle of providing a twin stream recycling collection service in the future. And this is a collection of fibre, paper and card, and dry mix recycling separately, with separate food waste and refuse collections. Future dry mix recycling is likely to include glass, plastic pots, tubs and trays, flexible plastics, foil trays and cartons, as well as the plastic bottles, tins, cans and aerosols you can currently recycle in Portsmouth. A new materials recovery facility is being developed to enable the twin stream recycling collection service. At the Environment and Climate Change Decision Meeting in December 2021, the Cabinet Member for Environment and Community Safety took a decision to adopt the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy, and this aligns the direction of travel for all Hampshire authorities and highlights a twin stream collection system is the preferred option for Portsmouth City Council and all the authorities in Hampshire. Just to provide you a small amount of background on the waste provision at the Portsmouth City Council housing blocks, the council is a social housing landlord for around just over 1,000 blocks, and has the responsibility for approximately 570 housing blocks as both the landlord and the waste collection and disposal authority. This is approximately 8,500 dwellings. And we also have approximately 500 blocks located in the Lee Park and Weecott Farm, and the waste is collected from these blocks by Havant Borough Council. And as a landlord, the council is responsible for ensuring tenants have the correct information and suitable waste storage facilities to manage their waste in the right way, and to contact tenants if there are concerns raised regarding their waste storage or presentation of their waste. So the project, Waste Management, Housing and Building Services have set up a joint project that is looking at all of the PCC housing blocks, as we have a landlord responsibility to ensure waste storage facilities are adequate for the waste allowance needed now and in the future. With more waste streams to be collected separately, there is a need to ensure we can accommodate these changes at all our housing blocks. So the project's got 4 main aims, is to provide correct bin provision and capacity for weekly refuse collections, to provide sufficient recycling and capacity for weekly recycling collections, to understand and remove barriers to recycling whilst empowering and educating residents to recycle fully and correctly, and to reduce ASB, antisocial behaviour, associated with and around bin stores. The project will trial the twin stream recycling collection system at 5 of our housing blocks. This will mean each block in the trial will have a refuse collection, a food waste collection, a dry mix recycling collection, and a fibre collection. Blocks included in the project trial are Berry House in Buckland, Picton House in Somerstown, Learminster House in Paulsgrove, Gerard House in Hilsey and Millgate House in Portsea, and these were selected as they range in size, style and flat sizes. In addition to the 4 waste streams I've mentioned above, each block will also have a glass bin and a small electrical item bin. We are planning minor improvement works to be carried out at the 5 trial blocks, and that's to ensure the additional bins can be accommodated safely at the block, and this will improve lighting, paintwork and flooring, and include new signage and stickers that have been designed to hopefully clearly explain what waste can be placed in the bins. The report lists some key dates which we'll be undertaking, but just to provide some background, because we've undertaken some of these, some of the key dates already. The team have been out to the residents consortium already, and have received feedback from the residents, which I think was overall positive. They understood why we were having to make the changes and recognised there would be challenges, but they were also keen to be involved. And the team have also been out to all the trial blocks now and undertaken door knocking. And so far have had positive feedback. People are glad to be involved, understood the changes for the trial, and pleased they're getting separate food waste collections. We are commencing the bin swap over next week at least 2 of the blocks. So just to say, by trialling these changes, we will learn more about the volumes of each waste stream produced by housing blocks and how we can best support residents to recycle fully. We will be able to understand more about changes needed to the waste storage facilities to accommodate additional bins and the effectiveness of our communication and engagement methods before rolling these changes out to all our housing blocks in a phased way. And it's just wanted to make an important note. So although residents will be asked to separate their recycling into 2 streams at the moment, so that's going to be dry mix recycling and fibre, for the moment these will be collected in the back of the same refuse collection vehicle for the trial until the twin stream collection service is fully implemented in the city. That's likely to be in 2025 when the new materials recovery facility is built, but I just wanted to just confirm that point. The outcomes and learning from the trial will be used to form the guidance that will then be shared with private landlords and housing associations when the twin stream collections are implemented. Any questions?
Thank you for that, David. Questions will emerge, I'm sure, from some of us as we go along. You mentioned the Residents' Consortium, what you thought they had. So we have Residents' Consortium people here. So I'll start with Felicity, whether you have any questions or any comments on this at all. You could say no, don't worry, it's all right.
Not really. I like the idea though, especially having being able to glass collection and stuff, because a lot of people, I drink a lot, so I have a lot of glass. It generally needs to go quite frequently to the glass bin, so that's going to be really helpful. Also, I know that people around my area, in my residents association, they're having issues at the moment with what is it called, fly tipping. They keep getting notices for putting down a certain say a toaster or something. They're putting it in the bin, they're getting fined for fly tipping, so I think that will be a nice welcome for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Felicity. I won't ask what you drink, but I'm sure it's lemonade or elderflower. Sue.
Yes, also, I do think it is a good idea, but obviously there's going to be hiccups along the way, especially with, some blocks. I don't know how they're going to manage the food waste. Personally, I wouldn't be able to get everything downstairs, but the idea itself is brilliant, yes. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Sue. So, Dave, just following on from what Sue's just said, and this is something I know I've raised previously, for people, particularly our senior citizens who find it hard to get down 10 flights of stairs, how are they going to be helped to actually recycle more? Are people just going to knock on their doors and do it for them?
Well, we have started some conversations. So just to say, for for residents within who live in houses in the city, we offer assisted collections for those residents that have mobility issues or a need. So we go in and collect their bins, and we are in discussions with our estate services colleagues about how we might implement some changes to actually help those residents with a need to mobility issues which might prevent them sort of taking their recycling down to the bin stores.
So how's that going to work in a trial block like, say, Millgate House, which is, for people who don't know, is a tower block in Portsmouth?
Well, we haven't yet. The plan isn't yet finalised, but obviously part of the trial is to sort of look at the barriers and to find out from residents what the barriers are to them recycling fully, and we hope to understand this and then look at the changes we can possibly implement.
Can I suggest that it is, because we start next week? If that's okay, David. Maria.
Thank you. I don't have any questions and comments as such. I thought I would actually wait to get the results of the trial, but I would appreciate someone like Ashley or Rebecca coming to a consortium, perhaps midway through the trial, just to let residents know how it's progressing. But otherwise, I'd rather wait until the end of the trial.
That's fine, Maria. Thank you very much. And I'm getting nods over there, so I think that's going to happen, which is great news. George.
Thank you, Darren. Obviously, it's a positive thing, and nice to meet you finally, by the way, in person, after many emails. The only thing I've got, well, I've got a few things, actually. First of all, how many bins are there? Because I was trying to keep track then, and I was trying to look on the report, and then you added electrical bins and stuff above. So that's the first question. How many actually individual bins is there going to be, different kind of bins?
Yeah, no problem. There's going to be, so you're going to have a general waste bin. You'll have 2 bins for your recycling, which is going to be one for, we call it dry mix recycling, and one for fibre collections. You're going to have one for glass and one for small recycling items. When we actually move fully to twin stream, the glass bin will go, because you'll be able to put your glass within your dry mix recycling bin. So it's 5 for the moment, but there will be 6, sorry, for the moment, but there will be 5 when we come to introduce twin stream completely.
Did you say there was something for electricals and stuff as well? Then?
Yeah, in the trial blocks, we're going to implement a bin for small electrical items, so toasters, hair dryers, things like that.
So 7 bins. That's quite a lot altogether. In regards to, you said obviously about until 2025 they're being popped into the same waste disposal truck. So why is the question in regards to why are we having separate bins if the mentality is just to put it in the same truck? Because it just, to me, seems redundant, but I'm sure there's a good reason behind it.
So it's to trial this ahead of actually the implementation coming in fully. What we want to understand is we know the tonnages of the material we've got, but actually what we're really interested in is the volumes. We're also interested in to try and find out how much recycling items may end up in the refuse, such as glass at the moment, because there isn't a glass facility at all our blocks. Some of that glass may end up in the refuse. So what we're trying to do is find out actually how much recycling is currently ending up in our refuse stream that actually can come out and go into the recycling. It's also to start seeing how the barriers that prevent people recycling fully at the moment. So that's why we're keen to trial it ahead of a full. I mean, it's going to roll out because it's a legislative change we need to make. But what we're trying to do is preempt those changes, make the necessary changes to the box, test our communications, test how we're implementing that to see how residents take them up. So that's why we're doing it ahead of time.
So so what you're saying is that both of the individual bins will be weighted in regards to tonnage, and you'll keep a record of that, so that you know once the implementation period comes in, you know what weight to expect based on an average.
Yeah, some of it's volume and not weight, because we know the current weight at the moment, but volume is obviously a different to weight. So particularly around paper and card, it's quite challenging because we need to know how much of that. How many bins we're going to need to implement in terms of paper and card as opposed to the other streams. So that's why it's quite useful to start trying that at the moment to see that we're going to get the right amount of bins ready for when we come to implement the scheme completely.
Amazing. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. Feel free to add any comments if you want, George. If you've got no comments, again, that's lovely.
Other than it being fantastic, I think it's a good idea. It can only be a positive.
Thank you for that, George. Cal?
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, a couple of questions first, if I may. In terms of the blocks that are being used for this trial, could you just say a little bit about how those particular blocks were identified and chosen?
Yeah, certainly. Do you want to have to cover the specs?
Oh, yeah. So to choose each individual block, what we want to do is try and pick sort of blocks in different areas, just so sort of the estates teams and sort of local housing teams are sort of able to engage with it as well as it's going on. We wanted to pick a variety of blocks, so ones that had sort of different layouts for bin stores. So we picked Millgate for sort of a multi-storey block, just to see how that will work in terms of having the bin chutes there and residents taking their waste down to the ground floor. So it was just a sort of a mix, really, just to see how it works in different setups.
Thank you. And was the Cabinet member or any other political activist involved in identifying specific blocks, or was that an officer-led process?
I think it was more officer-led, so we did a sort of few presentations just presenting the blocks that we wanted to choose, and I think Councillor Sanders, you suggested doing the multi-storey block, so we put Millgate House into that after those discussions.
Okay, thank you. That's useful. It's just a specific question that came back from residents that would be useful then for me to feed back to them, because I think they'd had communication from particular political activists that they had personally been responsible for their block being chosen, which I thought was a bit strange because my understanding was it was an officer-led process, but that's useful clarification. Thank you. I've got some other specific feedback further to the previous meeting we've had from residents in the blocks in our ward in particular, so I thought it might be useful just to kind of feed that back. I'm sure it already has been anyway, but just to air it in a public forum. Firstly, Berry House, and I guess this is going to be a general issue across blocks and not something we previously discussed as an issue, but I thought was a good point. Residents have raised there the size of their kitchens and their kind of internal space in order to sort through different items. I mean, the same with me. I live in a quite small council flat and I've got a tiny little space for one bin. It's then going to be difficult, I guess, for people if they've got to have different bins or different containers around. I don't think there is an easy solution to that, but obviously something that we need to, I guess, be aware of and be aware of people's limitations in terms of the space within their properties. Also in terms of the locations of bins, so again, this came specifically from Berry House, but no doubt will be a kind of general issue going forward. At the moment, their bins are contained within a purpose-built shed. And I think as a result of the new additional bins, there's going to be bins kind of outside of that. So there are questions raised, I guess, around, I guess, partially the look of that, but also if that's going to have an impact on keeping the space tidy and clean, etc. So it'd be useful to hear feedback on those 2 points, if you have any. And then lastly, in terms of Millgate House, residents contacted me over the last couple of days who think works have just started there around reorganising the layout of the outside space. And the residents were a little bit unhappy that they feel that they're losing some of their communal kind of green area, which is quite limited at the front, which is where people tend to use. They have got a much larger green space at the back, but it doesn't tend to get used because it's in shade almost all of the day. So I guess it might be too late to do anything about that if the work's already started, but I said I would raise it anyway and ask the question.
So if I'll start with the sort of Berry House and the kitchen sizes, we do know that that's a big issue for residents, and that's part of the trial of sort of working with them and what we could do better for them to help them sort of with recycling. We do supply sort of reusable flats bags, so they sort of fold up sort of nice and neatly and they can sort of put their recycling in there. So what they'd have for the trial, they'll have their sort of food waste caddy, which I understand that might take up quite a lot of space on their kitchen side, so that's something we'll look into. And then given the sort of the flats reusable bag for their mixed recycling, and also a glass bag if they want one for the glass bins as well. But yeah, it's definitely something that we'll be looking closely at and how we can help residents with the space issues. With Berry House as well, with the location of the bins outside, it's something as well what we'll look at for Millgate House as well, is I know they've sort of lost that green space, and the bins will be sort of there in front of them. That was one of the concerns that residents had when we went door knocking. They sit on the benches outside and they don't want to be sort of staring at the bins, so want to sort of thinking maybe having sort of planters or screening just in front of the bins, just so they're not as obvious there, and they're enjoying their community spaces.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think there's always going to be these issues that need to be ironed out, and of course that's the point of doing a trial, is to work out what some of those are. So hopefully when it's the wider rollout, some of those have already been addressed. I think in general, of course, supportive of anything that's going to drive up recycling rates, and in fact over kind of many years, feedback that we've quite often got from residents, particularly in council blocks, is that they would like more recycling options. And the fact, for example, that the food waste trial wasn't rolled out to the blocks, people felt a little bit left behind, so there's probably kind of a bit of catching up there to do. But I think, yeah, in general, it's something to be welcomed, and also welcome the engagement that's already taken place with residents, as you've said, so some of these issues have been identified, and also kind of us as ward councillors. I know you've kind of, yeah, given us briefings on that and given us the opportunity to provide any feedback, so thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Daniel.
Yeah, a few of my questions have already been answered, specifically about space in kitchens that Cal mentioned. I think probably one of the only things that I could ask really is about the info packs and whether they're available throughout the consultation. Just ironically, they might get recycled on their own, so if residents are able to access that information throughout the trial, that would be handy. My other question is, in terms of once you found the information you've collected, how are you then going to feed that back to residents so they know what information they have after they've taken part in the trial? And I think my final question is more just about my own interest. I understand that DEFRA have finished on a consultation with bottle return schemes. So while you're here, I just wanted to ask if you've had any conversations with DEFRA, or indeed any information, so that may come up in the future, but may not necessarily relate to housing, but I just wanted to ask that while you're here.
Yes, so with the feedback with residents, as we're going along the trial, we'll be engaging with all the residents there, sort of asking their opinions on what's working, what's not working, the barriers, and we'll work with the resident engagement team to sort of do that piece of work. What we'd also like to do is survey the wider Portsmouth residents and what they find are their barriers with recycling and their waste provisions, and what issues they find around their bin stores. So there'll be a lot of engagement with residents, and well, when we do the surveys, we'll feed back to the residents what they have told us. Yeah, and with the information packs, we'll be supplying some more information to residents when we swap over the new bins, so they'll get an information pack on how to use them, and we'll also look at popping notices up in the community sort of rooms and notice boards there, just a bit more information how they can contact us if there's any issues. But we will be monitoring it very closely with our waste officers as well as the estate service team.
I think the other question was on the deposit return scheme, wasn't it? I haven't seen the consultation response yet from DEFRA, but there was a number of consultations in the summer last year related to the Environment Act, covering all the kind of legislative changes that are going to affect particularly waste management. Deposit return scheme is one of those. We're still waiting for feedback at the moment from DEFRA. As you said, there may be a consultation feedback at the moment, but I haven't received that. The deposit return scheme will impact drinking containers, and the government are looking to introduce a scheme whereby members of the public can take their drinking container back, be it a glass bottle, plastic bottle, back to a point where when you buy your drinks container, you actually pay a small deposit on that, and then when you take it back, you receive that deposit back. So they are looking to introduce that at the moment. We're waiting on clarification how that's exactly going to work, because there has been some discussion exactly how that's going to implement our recycling schemes, and we're still kind of awaiting that feedback. Although, as you said, it may now be released, but yeah, I haven't had a chance to review the consultation response. But we did respond to the consultation.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Daniel, and thank you very much, everybody, for their comments and their questions, which I think have been very constructive. I mean, when we came back as Liberal Democrats came back as an administration in 2018, we saw how shockingly low the recycling rates were in the city, and the fact that pretty much nothing had changed in terms of what you could recycle for years. Cal's point about blocks can be replicated in pretty much every house across the city that any of us have ever knocked on, and saying, why don't you recycle more? And so we've been trying to find ways of doing it. We have, as an administration, faced some barriers. Daniel rightly talked about the DEFRA consultation, but we've been hearing about stuff around glass deposit return schemes and plastic bottle deposit return schemes for 2 or 3 years, frankly, and that's actually delayed things because we don't want to spend £100,000 on a truck that we don't need. That seems to me to be a waste of council taxpayers' money. So we've been working on ways in which we can actually respond to the climate emergency in a constructive way. And George's point is right, is that actually one of the quick ways you can do it is to do it in council blocks. In my old authority in Lambeth, we trialled it and we found recycling went up massively, which is hugely helpful. And one of the reasons we've left blocks till last with the food waste recycling trial is because of the difficulties such as the kitchens and everything else that the people have raised here. So that's why it's important to do a trial. It'll go wrong, things will go wrong, people will complain. But that's why it's important to do a trial in as many blocks as possible, because we do want to drive up recycling rates, particularly with food waste and the practicalities of food waste that Cal mentioned. Food waste has been one of the ways we could actually increase recycling the most. We've found in houses that emissions of equivalent CO2 emissions have come down by 20%, which is a huge help for us in terms of making our city greener. So I think taking on, Dave and Ms Adams, if you can take on board the various comments that have been made, particularly around Sue's point around how on earth we're going to deal with the many senior citizens who exist, that will be helpful. I suspect this is going to come back here, particularly if we're going to actually roll this out across all our blocks, which I want to do, and see how it goes. But I would encourage everybody, we've got councillors from the 3 of the 4 wards who are affected here today, to feed that back to the team. I've asked my Liberal Democrat colleagues for Picton House to do the same, so that we can get open and honest feedback, because this is really good. This has the potential to be really good and a real step change in our recycling, and I just wanted people to know, which is why it's here. So thank you very much for taking the time to come with us. You can stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish, or you can go and do something else. So it's very kind of you. Thank you so much. Right, we move to the second item, which is the PCC Social Housing Landlord Services in Havant. Mark.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. So I'll be presenting this paper. It is a fairly short and sweet paper, and it is to identify and highlight the services that we provide as a landlord in another local authority area. In Havant, in the borough of Havant, we've got 1/3 of our stock, and we were invited to a meeting with other RPs and provided or produced a briefing paper. And in the production of that briefing paper, we understood and learnt that actually we don't necessarily promote those services very well on our website to other people, and into particular the residents that live in the borough of Havant, and to the rest of the community in Havant. So we provided a very comprehensive briefing pack for the meeting, but then started to work on an info pack that goes onto the website, which is why Steve's here, sat behind me. So we prepared that, and that is now live on the PCC website. And we will continue to work with the Borough of Havant and the officers in Havant on all of the aspects, and have regular liaison meetings with their officers and their members to ensure that we work together collaboratively. Again, it is a paper for information only, and I'm happy to take any questions, and hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to go onto the website and see the infogram.
Thank you for that, Mark. Cal. Sorry, I apologise. No, I got that wrong. Right, Residents Consortium colleagues. Any thoughts, ideas, or inspiration? I know many of your members are from Havant, or the Borough of Havant, I should say. Maria.
Yes, I was just wondering, because we have residents from that area coming into the consortium, does Havant Borough Council have residents attending their meetings with you?
No, they don't at the moment, Maria. At the moment, the liaison meeting is an officers' meeting, but there's no reason why we couldn't look for a similar sort of thing in the Borough of Havant, if that's something that Havant as a local authority and the tenants would find beneficial and would help with that relationship. So we can certainly look at that, and I can talk to Nicola about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Felicity? No? Sue? Okay, thank you. Now I can get to the politicians. Cal?
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, kind of linked, I guess, to the issue of PCC stock in Havant. I'll just be curious to understand a bit better about how allocations to those properties work.
Mark?
Yeah, in terms of our own stock in Havant, we've got 100% nomination rights. On new developments, so some of the developments we've already done, Havant will have a percentage of those that they'll have nomination rights on. And that could be either just the first let, but depending on the nomination agreement, it might be in perpetuity nomination rights for a particular block or particular properties. But the vast majority of our stock in that borough, we've got 100% nomination rights to.
And so just to be clear, if we're nominating someone to a property in, say, Lee Park, do they have to have local connection to Lee Park in order to qualify, or is it just...
No, they need to be on the register, the Central Portsmouth Housing Register.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, just, I've previously worked in a housing role in Havant, and I know it can be a bit confusing, I think, to residents having those dual allocations processes. And I don't always think people are kind of aware that sometimes they are able to apply directly to PCC if they're seeking housing.
If there are existing tenants.
Yeah.
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 But if they're a resident in Havant,
they go to Havant to join their register. If they're not our tenant.
But they could apply to PCC if they had a connection to Portsmouth?
Yes. Yeah, if they've got a connection to Portsmouth, they can apply to our register.
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends where they want to live.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I found completely confusing, Cal, was Havant has two waiting lists, effectively. One is PCC waiting list for PCC tenants, and we tend, although Mark is right, we tend to, the allocations tends to focus on people in Lee Park, and people in the borough of Havant, and then they have their other one, which is I think linked in with the rest of Hampshire, as far as I understand it, Mark.
Yeah.
So they have two waiting lists, which I find a bit strange, but that's sadly down to the nature of how housing in Havant works, in which we are just one landlord, albeit the biggest. Joe?
Thanks, Darren. I was just going to say that we've got a section of our allocation policy that relates to our land holdings in that area, and also we've got an incredibly close working relationship with their operational housing need team because of the joint work and the connection, and what we try and do is to look for the best solution between us. I would say it's probably one of the strongest local relationships that we've got, and the officers have a really good understanding of each other, and we don't let being in two different places hamper what we give to that customer. So we make sure that we work quite closely together. Teresa, who is my head of service for housing need, works directly with Dan, and as Mark mentioned, the housing management team also meet with the Havant team, and yesterday I met with the new strategic lead for housing in Havant as well. So we're really closely linked in terms of our work together to make sure that our residents don't find themselves disadvantaged by our separateness, shall I say.
Okay. Does that answer your questions, Cal? If not, feel free to ask some more.
Yeah, no, it does answer my questions. I guess it just raises the question, which I don't necessarily have an answer for, but an interesting one to pose, of kind of who the PCC stock in Havant is for, i.e. is it for people in Portsmouth or is it for people in Havant?
It's a bit of, it is an interesting philosophical question, and far too philosophical for about 11:15 on Thursday morning. But the first duty has to be to our tenants. We happen to have, as far as I can see, we happen to have about 5,000 homes in Havant. It used to be more. We want to build some more, but that one of the other odd philosophical questions is that effectively the people who decide these things are all elected by people in Portsmouth and not in Havant. Which comes back to Maria's point, which is how do we use the stuff in the social housing white paper to involve people living in Havant, which is a whole other philosophical question to have. Joe, you're going to answer it, my grief.
I'm going to bravely step into the philosophical.
You can unbravely do it as well, I don't mind.
Just to say that I think I've been in housing about 21 years and I worked in the Lee Park area office for quite a long time. I think it would be fair to say that the residents of Havant who aren't our tenants do benefit from our strong presence in those areas. And so people who have perhaps moved into properties that used to be council properties but that still sit within our estate areas definitely benefit from our estate work. They definitely benefit from knowing that there's a local office, and it was one of the points that was raised yesterday by the strategic officer that I met with, was the benefit to local people, whether they're our tenants or not, of having our area offices that they can attend to ask a question, because obviously people generally ask us questions about where to go and what to do, and we don't only answer them if they're our tenant. So I think being there helps not only our tenant but also the general residents of that area.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that. I'm not sure that was deeply philosophical.
Yeah,
but
I think that's enough philosophy.
Philosophy ed. Right, okay, excellent. Right, no Heidegger at this time in the morning. Daniel.
I'm just going to follow on from that because I know I'm going to get asked by residents. Statistically speaking, being on two lists more likely to get you a home? Because I don't want people in Hillsey asking me, well, if you're in Havant, you can be on two lists. You're more likely to get a home because you've got the Havant list and the Portsmouth list. So I just need basically reassurance that it's down to individual need rather than being like obviously having a better chance if you're in Havant than in Portsmouth.
Shall I take that one? I think the reality is that we try not to have people double registered, and we do pieces of work, particularly when we have new developments, where we spend a lot of time looking at the registrations and working together and going through them on a person by person basis. I've never found any major double counting really, or double registration. What I have found is that being a stock holding authority, this is getting a little bit into the realms, the depths of knowledge, but because we're a stock holding authority, when we develop, we build what we need, and what we need can be looked at in a number of ways. So we look at our archetypes of housing, we look at what people are waiting for, we look at people who are what we call living in the wrong home. So they need a home and they're in one of our homes but it doesn't do what they need. And what we try and do is we plug the gaps in our archetype of housing to make sure that we've got things for everybody. We also, I'm going to talk about buybacks in a minute, and we sometimes purchase properties where we don't have that type as well. Havant isn't a stock holding authority, and one of the things that we do when we work with them and when we allocate them property through our developments is to try and do the same for them as we do for ourselves. So one of the things that Mark referenced was sometimes we give them a first allocation, but then we'll keep that right in perpetuity. In other occasions where we're just giving them a standard general needs allocation, we might give them that right in perpetuity. So we try very hard to not be too rigid in how we provide homes for them to let, but if they have one family who needs something very specific and they can't find that elsewhere, and they won't get that through their other housing allocations where homes are offered to them, then we do try and support them in that. So I think I haven't noticed one or other benefiting people more. I do think stock holding authorities who are developing have a better option of plugging those gaps in properties that they don't have.
Does that answer your questions? Thank you for that, Daniel. George?
I've got nothing to comment on this report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I think it's useful that we actually do highlight the work that occurs in another authority. It's a very weird situation. You know, someone elected in one authority effectively decides 5,000 homes in another one. I think that the new political leadership in Havant is very keen to improve council stock. I mean, you've got this weird situation whereby we will look after the homes, Havant will look after the pavements, and Hampshire will look after the roads, which seems to be nuts, but anyway. So I think I'm encouraged by that political lead. A lot of it is around the officer approach, which is encouraging. But I think it's useful to highlight. I'm particularly impressed that the web page was published a week before this meeting. I think that was highly, I'm sure, completely coincidental, but it shows the advantage of doing all this in public. Grateful for any feedback. I understand the issues around the two lists that Daniel has raised. My understanding is they're different. One applies to the whole of Hampshire, which is fun, and the other one is focused on our tenants. But I think it's important because it often, I don't want our duties to people in Havant to be overlooked, which is why this report is here, and in part the next one is here. So I think that's all proposed, and I think that's all supported as it's noted. So thank you for those comments. Now to the final report for the day, which is the buyback and development of council homes. Who wishes to do this, Jo?
Thank you, Darren. So you asked for an update on our progress with buyback. So buyback is a word that we use to talk about where we are repurchasing a home that was previously a council home, and then to look at the development pipeline that we have coming forward. The report is to update on year-to-date progress, and you'll notice in the appendices there's some detail, which I'll take you through in a moment. We continue to actively purchase property to be part of our housing revenue account and to be used as social housing. And we monitor our statistics monthly, so the figure that you have here is to the end of June. So to the end of June, we'd completed on 30 purchases and have another 100 which are in the conveyancing process. You'll then notice that we're estimating that we'll buy at least 100. That's because some properties do fall out of the conveyancing process and people change their mind about whether or not they want to sell that property to us. Appendix A will give you a detailed breakdown of the properties that have been purchased to date, and it separates that into different archetypes of housing, so flats, houses, masonettes, bungalows and studio flats, and it also gives you the year-to-date by property archetype as well. So we started this in 2016 and you'll see how that has ramped up in more recent years. In 16-17, when we started, as you'll see, we purchased 6 properties. To date, we've now purchased 370, with 352 being purchased since 18-19. With regard to development, we continue to develop new council housing, and we've been working alongside other directorates, and as I just mentioned with Havant, to look at how we can develop our stock. The pipeline of council housing sits in addition to the work that's done by our Regeneration Directorate on strategic developments across the city, and also in addition to the Ravelin housing work. So there are 3 different pipelines of housing. The current pipeline, which is attached to Appendix B, details the development sites which have been approved or gone through democratic process, and you'll see there that we've got schemes which are likely to return 657 units. We have an overall pipeline, though, of in excess of 750, and that's because some of our units are currently in feasibility and haven't actually come to democratic decision. And what you'll see is that those reports will come forward individually over the coming months, and we'll bring forward each scheme as we complete the work on it so that we have a fuller pipeline. We develop a number of different types of accommodation. So in our recent Doyle Avenue development, we've had adapted accommodation, flats for general needs and general need housing. We're just about to complete our Patey Court development, which is in Paulsgrove, which is supported housing for adults. And what you'll see across our stock is a mixture in new build of supported and social housing, but ensuring that people in supported housing also have the right to their own tenancy and to have the same tenancy rights as other people.
Okay, thank you for that, Jo. Residents Consortium. Any thoughts, Sue? It's all right, you can say no, don't worry, it's all right. It's okay. Felicity? No? Maria?
Do you know approximately how many properties would be available for you to buy back?
Well, in theory, any leasehold property. So, but I think there will come to a point we have targeted our leaseholders predominantly, and every time that we do our estimates to them and our actuals where we do their accounting of their service charge, we make sure that they always think of us first if they're going to sell their property. I think you were at a recent residents consortium where one of the leaseholders said, oh yeah, I got that in my note and it's stuck on my fridge in case they ever want to sell my property. So that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that our leaseholders have us in mind before they see other people in terms of selling their property. In reality, there will potentially come a point where there isn't anyone who wants to sell. We haven't seen a slowing down in offer, and we've got, I think, just over 2,000. About 2,000. So we've got about 2,000 leaseholders, and we're buying just over 100 properties a year. So it isn't unreasonable to think that of that 2,000, people will continue to want to purchase. Our main aim, if I'm honest, is to rely on developing new homes, and we're using buyback to supply new homes while we're ramping up our capacity and capability to build more. Thank you, Maria.
Is that okay, Maria? Thank you very much. Daniel.
I've walked around the Doyle Avenue development, and I think it's actually really good. Definitely the kind of level of housing we need in Portsmouth. In terms of buyback, how do you ensure you get value for money, given that house prices are so high at the moment? So I'm just trying to think of, how do you offer a palpable offer to the leaseholder so they actually think of you first, rather than, say, a landlord who owns X amount of properties who can offer more money than possibly than the local authority?
I think, so we always use external valuers because we need to validate that what we're doing is value for money, and a valuer will provide us with a window of negotiation, and then what happens is that our acquisition officer will work with the person selling their property, our vendor, to understand what they're looking for. In my experience, what people like is the certainty of sale. If we offer to buy the property, we're going to go through with it. So all that umming and ahhing and they might or they might not goes away, which I think gives people a lot of clarity and assurance when they're moving forward and they want to move on to another property. And I think that helps them if they have a forward chain. I think that they also are appreciative of not needing to engage estate agents and pay those fees. And I think that helps in the financial transaction. Very happy to share average prices with you. They are surprisingly low, and people are surprisingly reasonable. We're also, because we're offered so many properties, if we have someone who wants to go away and try their luck on the open market, they quite often do that. We're not against it, go for it. If you could get more money for your property, that's fine. And then quite often we have people circle back to us when that is actually quite a hard thing to do. We provide a really good service to leaseholders in terms of making sure that we inform them of what service charges will be, and our leasehold officers are great at working with people. So there's nothing to prevent people selling their leasehold properties on the open market, but I think they tend to prefer the lack of stress and hassle. We know how difficult moving is, of actually working with us and having that assured transaction.
Just to follow up, so is there also a mechanism, so let's say I own a leasehold in Portsmouth and I sell it to you, but I don't want to move, is there a mechanism for that, or is it that part of the deal where, sorry, you're not on the list, you have to move property?
So we try and look at the things separately. So if I have someone who's living in a leasehold property who's likely to have their property repossessed by a mortgage company, or if we have someone who's living in a leasehold property that no longer meets their needs and they need sheltered housing, what we try and do is to understand that. It's very unusual for someone to have their property purchased and to stay there. We have purchased properties from other landlords who have decided to sell, and we've thought we're not going to house that person better, so we've bought that property and allowed the tenant to then stay there. So we try to be imaginative about it. But what I would say is that for us, they're separate transactions and we think about them differently. So it's a standard piece of conveyancing for us, and we look at that as a standard piece of conveyancing, and we assess the person's housing need as a separate topic and work those things out. And then our housing need team and our leasehold team will work together to make sure that the transaction and the acquisition work for that rehousing situation. We have had situations where people have, not recently because we're really, really good at ensuring that everybody that goes through with the right to buy understands exactly what they're getting into, understands their income and expenditure position, and knows that they can afford that property once they purchase it. But in the past, I think before we did all of that work, we did have leaseholders who really got into financial difficulties, or who were sometimes targeted by unscrupulous organisations to buy their property. And so we've had a few situations where we've needed to recover positions for people, but we find it best to just deal with it, really straight down the line. What is your conveyancing issue that you're bringing to us, and what is your housing need issue?
Cool. Thank you for that, Joe. It's nice to know there's a sense of duty of care as well, like for residents. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. George.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, I've got a few questions, to be fair. First of all, on a personal note, Patty Court is amazing in Paulsgrove. It's been nice to, because obviously I only become a councillor just over a year ago when the development was really starting to take hold, and it's really nice to see the development stages from start to finish. And it's a real nice asset to the community in that local area. It looks really stunning. And I believe in a couple of weeks we're all going to get to see the finished project. So that's really, really good. So before I become a councillor, to be honest with you, I had no knowledge at all of the right to buy scheme. I didn't, hands up, I had no knowledge about it and no previous experience of it. So my knowledge is quite vague. However, just for clarity's purposes, and let's say this might be a silly question, but I'm going to ask it so I understand it. So say somebody buys the property via the right to buy scheme, how many years they have to wait before they can sell it back to us? That's the first question I've got. The second question would be say we purchase a property, how many years after we purchase that property could somebody theoretically buy it back off of us through the right to buy scheme, thus losing us a net asset and obviously costing us money? And thirdly, which is one that might have just slipped my eyes, I'm not fully familiar where the Horatia and Leamington development scheme is. So if you could just clarify where that is for me, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
In terms of right to buy legislation, a leaseholder can exercise their right to buy, get the discount, live in it, and they can sell it whenever they want to. But there is a tapering repayment of the reduction that they got from the asking price, but they could sell it at any time they want. They're free to sell it on the open market without any repayment of the discount after 5 years. So that's when most leaseholders look at selling if they bought it to gain a foot onto the property market and then want to move into another property. So it's 5 years basically. I don't know whether you want to answer the question about selling again.
So there's something called a cost floor in right to buy legislation, which basically allows you to not lose money that you've either spent on developing an asset or on purchasing an asset. And that's in place for 15 years. Again, it's got a taper. And what it does is it allows you to effectively make a sensible financial appraisal, because you can look at the situation that will occur in 15 years. And up until that point, it doesn't require you to be out of pocket in the sale. So it then deals with the discount issue differently.
Wonderful. And the last thing I've got to ask, which is something I've already asked you in person, but I know that there's somebody watching today that actually asked me to ask you the question. So, and as I say, I've already asked this a couple of weeks ago, but in regards to Venture Tower, so you know what I'm going to ask already, just for public reasons, could you just explain why we haven't purchased the property to turn into a massive story of housing flats? Thanks.
I realised I didn't answer your H&L question either, so I'll do that one in a minute. So Venture Tower was offered to the Housing Department to look at a development. When we look at developments, I have to be honest, we're a fairly land-rich council. And so what I look at in a financial appraisal and my team look at will be what the most cost-effective way of developing is. What we're doing at the moment is understanding our need and then working out the archetypes of housing that we need to fill that. And what we've been concentrating on are sites that we already have within our ownership. So in some cases where a piece of land might actually be costing us money to sit there not doing anything. I know it sounds a bit strange, but if you've got a piece of land that someone has to sweep and someone has to pick up rubbish off and those sorts of things, those bits of land actually cost us money. So what we try and do is to look at our land holdings and to deal with those first. first. We do have the capacity to buy a piece of land, and I have to tell you, there are definitely pieces of land around the city that I would really want, because they would allow us to do things within our communities. And so I do occasionally look at things and think, God, that would really help. But I have to say, with Venture Tower, I think it's an opportunity that will be fine in the private sector, and I don't think it's something that the council needs to do. The council, in a wider context, may want to, but for the housing department, I didn't feel it was necessary for us to make that investment in order to provide the homes that we need. Did I give you the same answer both times?
Pretty much, yeah. It's just to say, the person that asked me to ask you originally is watching, so I just thought and obviously in regards to Horatia.
Yes. So the Horatia and Leamington consultation continues, and I think some of you here are involved in that consultation. We're hoping to be in a position to bring forward a planning application as we come into the autumn, and we're at a point now where we're talking about interior finishes. We've got the blocks sorted, we understand what they're going to look like, and we're literally down to tiles and floor coverings and things like that. So we've got another 2 meetings this week where we're looking again at the interiors of the community spaces and the housing, and then we'll come to a point of design freeze, and at the design freeze point they'll then move on with the costing model, and then Wayne will get his hands on a new cost model, and we'll be able to bring that forward then. So we're looking for more to be happening in the autumn, but at the moment it's still about doing all of that engagement on what the inside of the buildings look like.
Amazing, thank you for your time.
Thank you, George. Cal?
Thank you. Just firstly, and I appreciate people may not have this figure offhand, but it may have a ballpark figure. Do we know what the current rate of right-to-buy sales is?
Do you know, really frustratingly, I usually have it on the bottom of that table, and we've cut out half of the table to look at it. I can share it with you, Cal, and happy to circulate it to go with the minutes if you'd like me to today. So it's much lower than the acquired number is the key.
Yeah, that will happen, Cal. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, that's good news that we're buying back more than we're selling at the moment.
Cal, I hate to interrupt you, but I think a puff of smoke of an answer may have emerged at the back.
An accountant just whispered in my ear, it's about 70 a year.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's good to know. Obviously, the kind of unsaid thing there really is that there's still a massive deficit going back to 1979 or whatever it was that Right to Buy was really rolled out en masse. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's well over 10,000 properties that have been sold over that time. So we've still got a long way to go in terms of kind of making up social housing stock within the area to what it was, although we're making some progress, which is very much welcomed. I've just got a question about tenure. And I always get told off for using the word tenure because apparently I'm not supposed to use it in this context, but it's what I refer to it as. And I'm talking about the difference between affordable rent tenancies and social rent tenancies. Social rent tenancies being those kind of traditional level of council rents, which maybe be something like half of the market rate, and affordable rent being this new redefinition of social housing rents that the Conservative government brought in a few years ago, which allows social housing landlords to charge up to 80% of the market rent, which quite often will be a lot more. In terms of our buybacks and our pipeline, are any of the properties that we're looking to add to the council stock or re-add to the council stock going to be social rent tenancies, or will they all be at the affordable rent levels?
To start with tenure, I think the problem that we moan about using the word tenure is because all of those households have security of tenancy, so the council only issues secure tenancies. In terms of rent levels, and to answer your question, all of those developments proposed and our repurchases are currently at affordable housing levels. What I would say is that for every development that we do, Wayne, who's here, and I'm sure will be happy to talk to you about it, looks at 3 rent levels, so we always look at social rent. We also always discuss the social rent option with Homes England to see if they would be happy to bridge the gap in terms of grant to allow us to actually develop at a social rent, and we do have conversations about ensuring that the homes that we provide Portsmouth people can afford. So we spend a lot of time with people, and we've just done this work in great detail on Doyle Avenue to make sure that the families that move into those homes can afford them. We obviously have the benefit that a very, very large percentage of our stock is still at social rent, and so people do have a choice about whether or not they live in that property.
Okay,
I'm not going to ask if that answers your questions. I don't know. So
yeah, well,
carry on.
people who've been around this committee for a little while know this is one of my kind of pet interests, and particularly, I mean, a case study that is specific to our wards that some of the new people might find interesting is that Ivy Close, a new development in the past 4 or 5 years in Somerstown, happened to become available at the same time that people have been moved out of Horatio and Leamington. So lots of people that now live there are former Horatio and Leamington residents and did see their rents kind of almost double. And some people were happy with that because they got a brand new property and it may have been better than where they were. But obviously that had an impact, particularly on the households that were paying the rent directly themselves and not having it paid through housing benefit or universal credit. So I think it's always something worth noting. I do also understand that there are some social landlords currently developing housing within Portsmouth that are planning to deliver at least some of those properties at social rent. So I'm just curious about why it is that those social landlords are able to do that viably, where we're not.
I think you're probably referring to Vivid and the prison site, which has got social rented housing on it. We actually meet, we met, was it yesterday or the day before? We meet with our local RP partners and we discuss these sorts of issues. So one of the things, we're building really high-spec homes, which are, we're working to ensure that our residents have as low an energy bill as possible. Cheaper archetypes of housing and development methods are available, but what we are trying to do is make sure that people have really good quality homes for the future and that we maintain a really decent housing stock. Reb might want to say more about that, but what that does mean is that when we're building traditional homes with really good quality and thinking about their end user's budget at the end of the month and what those energy bills are going to look like, particularly at the moment, we are seeing an increase in our development prices above some of the timber-framed gas central heated options, and that is something that we consider in our building, and we have obviously come here before to discuss moving forward with passive house development, and we have a report due to come to you towards the end of the year where we will look at the difference in prices that we're seeing between our previous construction models. In reality, we are building homes which don't meet our affordability criteria when we look at them in social rent, but we will, when we come with the next development, you'll be able to work through that in detail. I don't know if Cal's had that opportunity previously, so we'll be able to work through it and show you we've got developments coming up in the next few months.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, if that's okay. Yeah.
You can do what you like.
Referencing specific properties within the pipeline, so Viking Court and Shoot Pool are 2 blocks that are within Charles Dickens Ward, currently privately owned but leased to Vivid, who use it as social housing. So it's currently people who are social housing tenants living within those properties. Previously discussed in these meetings, a lot of those people have had quite poor experiences of their housing in previous years, particular issues with getting quite basic repairs and maintenance done to the blocks because Vivid argue with the private landlord about whose responsibility is to do the work, and then more often than not the work doesn't get done. So it's good to know that the council is hoping to move forward with acquiring those blocks and bringing them into local authority ownership, and hopefully that will improve the experience of the people that are living there. This has now been dragging on for quite a while. It was, I don't know when, but a little while ago at least, when it was first proposed that these properties would be acquired. In the meantime, the people living there feel like they've been left in a bit of limbo. They've been told that the council is likely or is wanting to purchase these blocks. They haven't been told anything by their current landlords, and they're understandably kind of anxious about the future and coming to us as ward councillors. So I guess for their benefit, I wondered if there's any update that can be provided on that.
So I have good news, which is that I've finally seen all the contract paperwork, and I'm expecting the exchange to be imminent. To be very clear, and for those residents that are concerned, it's absolutely still our intention to purchase those properties. My understanding is that Vivid isn't reletting properties within the block any longer, but that they will not be issuing a notice to the residents until the exchange has actually taken place and they receive notice from the owner of the property. And I think that is the appropriate legal way to do it. Unfortunately, until we have an interest, it's not really appropriate for us to contact those residents, but as soon as we do have an interest in those blocks, we will make sure that there's quality engagement and that people understand their rehousing situations and how they'll be impacted.
Okay, thanks for the update, Joe. That's good to know. And while I note what the appropriate legal way of dealing with things might be, that's not always the best way of dealing with things in terms of ethics and the well-being of people that live there. I do think that particularly their current landlords, i.e. Vivid, should have been in closer contact with them and letting them know about what's going to happen with their future, even if it is just something to the effect of it's very limited what we can tell you, but these are some options, and just provide some reassurance. Obviously, we've been trying to do that with wards councillors, but we are not as involved as their current landlord or PCC as their future landlords. So I think, yeah, that's a point I wanted to make, because we are kind of constantly in contact with those residents, and I also live next door to Viking Court, so I regularly bump into people on my way out who ask me what's going on. So at least I've got a little bit more information I can feed back to them. Thank you. In terms of the new home provision in the pipeline, the 657 pipeline as we'll call it, I note that obviously a lot of those properties, probably about half, are a re-provision of a previous housing, as opposed to kind of additions, net additions, if you like. So Horatio and Leamington obviously is a re-provision of housing that was already there. I think Patey Court, Highgrove and Hillsey Lodge are also a re-provision of previous council-owned accommodation of a sort that was there. So probably worth noting maybe that they're not all new properties in terms of additions to the stock. It's good to see that there will be kind of 300 to 350 new properties being added, but we obviously need to try and do more, and I know there is lots of work being done to try and add to those numbers, but to get anything back to like the previous stocks that we've had, referencing earlier, kind of 12,000 properties lost through right to buy, we need to be really kind of building at scale to match the local housing needs. Another specific question that comes up a bit of casework that I previously discussed with Joe, but I'll turn it into a more general question. I'm aware there are random properties around our estates and our blocks that some way or another have ended up being owned by housing associations, and they might be in a council block or they're right in the middle of one of our council estates. And sometimes these are big regional or national housing associations without very much stock in Portsmouth, where tenants don't always have the best experiences. So the suggestions that we previously had, I had one case where the tenant has basically said, look, my neighbours are council tenants, the people living above me are council tenants, I would prefer to be a council tenant, is that an option? So I just wondered, obviously that's one specific example, but do we know if that's more of a general issue? Are there a significant number of housing association properties in our blocks and on our estates? And if so, is there any way of exploring the possibility, if that stock being transferred back to the council, you may be able to manage it better given the proximity to other council properties?
I know your first piece about additional homes wasn't a question, but I'm going to comment if that's all right, and then I'll come on to your RSL piece. So Patey Court, Highgrove, Doyle and Hillsey Lodge are all sites of former care homes. So what's happened is that there's been a different provision of accommodation across the city for those people, which has led to those homes coming to the end of their lives, or from Doyle Avenue's sake, it was a health clinic that went elsewhere. So they aren't actually a re-provision of affordable housing, they are a reuse of a formal social care site. Within the city, as we develop, you will predominantly always see us on brownfield, because most of the plots that we build on will have had something else on them before. So you'll see car park sites there, and there is one commercial unit that's no longer a shop that's being turned into a home. The only ones there that are a direct replacement of existing affordable homes are Horatio and Leamington. So just to be clear, I think that most land will have had a former use as we come to look at it. We do have one piece of green space there that is being built on, which is Cabbagefield Row, which is in Lee Park, and that is currently a green space, farming and agriculture space that is being turned into a development site. In terms of RSLs across the city, when there is an RSL who are deciding to no longer be based in the city, what will happen is a consultation with their residents where they will make them aware that they're considering doing something. Then they will contact local RP partners, and they'll also talk to our housing enabling officer, who makes sure that RPs act appropriately in the area, and they will provide an open tender. So there is at the moment an RSL within the city who are going through this process, and I think ward councillors might be aware of it because as part of their engagement they have negotiated some communications across a broader piece. Kevin, our Housing Enabling Officer, has ensured that they broaden their engagement slightly. And what happens there is that there will be a tender and bid, so that RP partners and the council are generally offered an opportunity to bid for that portfolio and to add it to their stock. Additionally, there are occasionally properties that we feel are really poorly managed, and we will challenge that management, particularly where you've got smaller RPs who don't have any local presence, who might not be dealing with maintenance in a timely manner, and we have on occasion picked up those properties, not necessarily at market value, but brought them into the stock because it's the right thing to do. We do the meeting that I referenced earlier that we hold with RP partners. Yesterday, our housing enabling manager rang a few of the RPs who didn't attend and asked them why, and said it would be very great if they did attend in the future, and they assured him that they'll be there. So we're really aware of who we've got operating in the city. We've given them a lot of support through offering Meredith's time and the time of his team and Mark's time to talk about local issues and context, and that forum is definitely improving. We're seeing some really engaged partners. Mark and I met with them, as I say, this week, who really are understanding local context, and we've also seen some managers who possibly don't have a Portsmouth context because they're a more regional RP, and we're asking them to take that local understanding, and we're making sure that through our meetings we share that understanding with them, and we're asking them to come to Portsmouth and to work with us so that we can show them what's happening here. So we did, for example, the work that Mark Sage has recently done. We've made sure that we've shared all of that. We've made sure that we've shared the food bank resources. We've made sure that making sure that they have all of the welfare information available to them. So we're working really hard to make sure that those residents have the same level of knowledge given to them by their housing provider as we share with ours. And we are also being really honest and direct when we think that service isn't good enough.
Cool. Thank you very much, Joe. That's good to hear. And I think in general, this is one of the reasons why personally I do have a bias towards council ownership of properties within the city, where it's appropriate, is that typically we've still maintained local connection with those communities. So, the property that I was talking about a minute ago is a person in Bucklands. They live hundreds of metres away from their housing office, where if they were a council tenant, they could go and speak to someone. The office of their housing association is probably tens, if not hundreds of miles away. So I do think the more they become kind of these super merged organisations operating at a national level, they are potentially losing connection with those local communities, which is something that the council has managed to retain. And just lastly, touching on kind of collaboration amongst social landlords within Portsmouth, this was something that came up, a key kind of outcome, I guess, from the Housing and Social Care Scrutiny Panel that I led last year, looking at social housing repairs and maintenance services, and the fact that landlords are often find themselves in competition with each other. Sometimes that's competition for lands. They all want to build out a particular piece of land that might become available, but also, interestingly, competition for staff, where there's a particular shortage of skilled trade staff and people are perhaps competing with each other. And one of the outcomes from that was to look at whether there were opportunities for closer collaboration so that people were kind of all working towards the same goal, as opposed to trying to fight one another for the best staff or the best bits of land. And I know that's something that's been picked up and it's being progressed. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Cal, and I wanted to start my remarks personally by thanking you and the rest of the panel for that report on the comparison between repairs in council and repairs in housing associations, which simultaneously managed to be eye-opening and unsurprising, I have to say. You weren't at the cabinet meeting where we agreed to the papers, so I thought it was sensible that we did that personally. I've also added that we actually need to discuss how we can all improve repairs as part of that as well. And so I've asked I've asked the officers to bring along housing associations for a polite chat about that later on in the year. So thank you very much for that. The reason to bring this today is because when Liberal Democrats resumed control of the council, in 2018, we faced several of the issues Cal has already outlined. There just wasn't enough homes Portsmouth people could afford. We used that rather than the government's definitions, because they just all seem mad, because for many people, affordable housing is unaffordable. There was no plan to build council housing at all. So we've had to put one in place. That's meant a delay in building council housing. But we also knew that many people wanted homes now, not wait for 2 or 3 or 4 years for them to get built. And that's why we set aside money for buying them back, as well as cutting the time in which homes were empty. So in council properties now, that time's been cut by 25%. That's good news. That means more people can move in quickly. We wanted to try and make sure people can move into homes. We've got a long enough waiting list, which Daniel and others have outlined earlier on as it is. So I want to try and do that. But we've also wanted to try and work with other people. And the prison site, which is in my own ward, is one that is very interesting and I think shows the limitations of the current financial regime unless we're creative. That was approved. I opposed the development partly because it was all private, frankly, and we needed homes Portsmouth people couldn't afford. After it was approved a second time, the Housing Association, Vivid, managed to secure government money, which at that stage we weren't able to access, but we can now. And that was able to deliver that amount of affordable homes in the area. And that also generated social rent. But trying to get them to put in things like solar panels, trying to get them, bless them, to challenge, to take the climate emergency seriously was a bit tough. I remember Councillor Stagg, Councillor Smith and I talking to them often about trying to be green. And it was just the limitations of the proposals that were on offer. And that's one of the frustrations we face as a council. In terms of passive homes, for instance, the Liberal Democrat Green Coalition in York, and it's the Greens who are leading on this because the Greens who are in charge of housing, are finding it very difficult to reconcile passive homes with social rents. They're finding that tough. And it's those trade-offs that are really important. We do have to be open and honest about those trade-offs going forwards because we all want rents as low as possible and homes as green as possible. It's as simple as that. And that's what we've done with Horatia and Leamington houses. And very successfully, I think. I mean, the level of community engagement, other colleagues may know more than I do, but the level of community engagement and the general approach has been revolutionary. People now feel involved after years when they were basically told, you know, your block's getting knocked down and we're doing it for you, is a real step change. And I know we followed on from the approach with Doyle Avenue, and I want to congratulate Hilsey Wall colleagues for actually steering us along in that way. Because we want to involve local people in the homes that they want, because we want communities, not just concrete. Going forwards, I'm very keen to see and the other thing with Horatia and Leamington is that we actually said we would provide the same number of council houses now as existed before, and we're actually providing more, which can only be good news. Going forwards, I've said to the team that I want us to buy back 500 council homes by March 2024. We are suspiciously on course for that, which is quite frightening in many ways. But we do look, Daniel, for things like value for money. So I've suggested people have come to me and suggested a couple of homes, and I've just left it up to the team because I don't want political involvement in this. And it just wouldn't deliver value for money for the council taxpayer and for, frankly, the people whose money we're borrowing. It's £100 million over 5 years we're putting into this programme, and we want to make sure we deliver value for money as well as good quality homes. The two things tend to go together. So I think going forwards this is highly encouraging. If anyone else has got any other sites, please come to us. I'm fully aware of the saga of Viking and Shootpool, which I think all of us feel is a saga, and hopefully we can make progress on that. But I think this is highly encouraging. It's the biggest programme of its type in the country. I'm delighted that we're doing it. And thank you very much, colleagues, for all your comments, and officers, please take all of them on board. We want to try and make sure particularly rents are as low as possible for as many people as possible, and make sure nobody moves into a place they can't afford, not least with inflation at 10%. So with that, hello, Alison. Oh, I remembered your name, thank you. Alison, I think we are done, so I'm happy if colleagues are okay to close the meeting at 11:27 a.m.